You have heard me say this month after month, year after year. Now, I'm in the real estate business and we're talking about return on investments. That's my business. I make clients money, I make my investors a return. And when we don't get that return, that's called risk. And we have two rules: we need to make money for our clients, and we don't want to lose money for our clients. Now, real estate is a very, very simple business: 14 years up, 4 years down. So I have a timing model. It tells us what we should start looking for. We got around 13 and a half years. We start looking for the peak. And the peak came in here in Phoenix, Arizona in June of 2022. Now it's boring after that because now I've got 4 years. So what happens when we hit the peak? The peak means it's not going up any higher. And if it's not going up any higher and you buy, that means you are going to lose, and that violates rule number 2. And we can't do that. So for the last 3.5 years, I have been saying, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. Business is going to really start to slow, and we're going to have problems. And we have not been buying. We've been doing 1031 exchanges because we've also been talking about the fact that there are some really tough business locations here in the United States. Chicago being one. They're in the news. I'm from Chicago, so I like to pick on them, but they're not all alone. There's Portland, Oregon. There's St. Louis. There's Seattle's having problems. San Francisco, of course, lots of places, and people are bailing from there, and they're coming here, and we're placing their capital that was already at risk. We're putting it back into the marketplace in a much, much better market. Now, we're going to talk about math today, just math. What makes me so sure that this is happening? Well, first off, our timing model is telling us that that's going to happen. But it also tells us that when you have math and it takes all the guesswork out, it tells us what's going to happen next. So let's just talk about what's going to happen next, because once you get to the peak, it starts to roll over just like it did in 1982, like it did in 1990, like it did in 2008, and it's like it's going to do in 2026. It's an 18-year timing model, and it is closing. We are going to have tons and tons of foreclosures. But I'm in investments, so let's talk about why we're not doing it and where I think we're going with this, because I have a very, very good idea where it's going. I've been talking to my clients as to how far down we're going to go. Now, this doesn't mean it has to go down that far, but we talk about risk. We're managing risk. Your money. You make a mistake in the marketplace at the wrong time, it will take you 10 or 15 years to recover. Now, a lot of my clients are baby boomers. They're my age. We haven't got 10 or 15 years. So if we make a mistake now, we are not going to recover. Now, here's the deal. That once we get through this, we are going to make an absolute fortune, because there's going to be properties everywhere that people made a mistake. So if you're undercapitalized, over exuberant, and over leveraged, and the market moves against you, you're cooked, you're baked, you're in trouble. And we're going to see lots and lots of foreclosures. It's already happening in Canada, and it's happening here. There was a big talk about why the Canadians were leaving. They were mad at Trump. No, they weren't mad at Trump. I mean, of course, the news blows this up. But Canada's been losing money on their real estate for the last 3 years, and they had big gains here, and they had big differentials on their currency. So it was a very, very advantageous for Canadians to sell here in the United States, take that money, take that profit, and take it home. And right here at home, we've got a lot of investors that over leveraged, and they are going to get wiped out. Someone's got to pick up the pieces. That's the way that works. Why do you think Warren Buffett is buying the builders right now? Because they are in deep, deep trouble. So he understands they're great companies. They just got too over leveraged. So let me go to my next slide. Let's just talk about what's going on and see where we are. Now look this is really easy. So we do math. So I'm buying single family homes because that is my marketplace. I like single family homes. It's a good market for us. We're into affordable housing, and our affordable housing, our clients, because of their single family homes, stay for a really long time. Our typical tenant stays 5 to 7 to 8 years. That's really, really nice. I've got two properties. I've said this before. I have two properties that only had two tenants each. The tenants stayed over 15 years. They paid my mortgage off for me, and this is what we're looking for. So it's just math. So let's just look at the math that we do to say what is going on in our marketplace. So when you do math, it's like science. It takes the guesswork out of it. I've talked to you about this before. Now, a cap rate is the capitalization rate. That is our return on investment. So a cap rate tells you what percentage you are receiving in your investment. Our cap rate has been around 4.5% for the last 7, 8, 9 years. So we talk about your ROI is very easy for math. ROI is just nothing more than a cap rate, the percentage times the price of the property. We have a lot of $400,000 properties. We had a 4.5% cap rate. So value equals return times cap rate. So oftentimes, so we would have return of $18,000. That's 4.5% times $400,000. And we can justify our $400,000. This is really easy, guys. We justify our $400,000 by saying the cap rate of 4.5%. Now, remember, we were in a ZIRP, zero interest rate policy world, where it was almost impossible to get any kind of yield. We were able to get 4.5. That was just phenomenal yield. And yields are going up, as you all know. Yields are going up. So if we got $18,000 at 4.5%, it would justify a $400,000 property. Now, here's what's going on. This is what's going on in my marketplace. In the last 18, 24 months here in Phoenix, we've had 42,000 brand new apartments come to fruition. And they're in lease up now. 42,000. Now, that puts a lot of pressure on rents. Now, a lot of these guys, they thought their pro forma, they were going to get $3,000 a month. And 2 or 3 years ago, that was a great idea. But now it takes them 2 or 3 years to start the project and complete the project, and they're going into lease up. They're finding out that, hey, that's not so. Not going to get that kind of money. They're going to get a lot less money. And so they're doing whatever they can just to survive and try and get some income coming in. They're giving up to 4 months concessions. They've reduced their rents. They're taking all kinds of different packages, reducing their security deposits, reducing their credit scores, anything we can to get these leased up, because it's really, really hard. So look at this. If you talk about vacancy, and so all you have to do, so $18,000 to $15,000, $3,000 is $250 a month loss. This is easy to do, guys. If you leave your property on the market for 2 months at $2,000, you've lost $4,000. We're talking about losing $3,000 over the 12-month period of a lease. I'm going to tell you, we're seeing $3,000 because people don't realize that the market is only going to give you what the market's going to give you. You can say, I want $2,500 a month rent all you want. And if the market isn't going to do that for you, you don't get it. And it's extending out vacancy. That reduces your return on investments, reduces the value of your building. So if your rent goes down just like $100 or $150, this could happen. It went up like $400 in the last 4 years. Can it come back down 150 or 200? Of course it can. Nothing is, it doesn't go, trees don't grow out of the sky. They change every once in a while. And that's what's happening now. We've had a change of trend, and you need to understand that. If you don't understand, you are not in the right business. Get out of the business. Get out of the business. You don't belong in this. Well, let me just talk about what's going on. Let's finish this, because this is what happens. If we're talking about the fact that you lose $3,000 in income at 4.5%, that $400,000 building drops to $333,000. But that's not the only thing that's in operation. So here in Phoenix, our cap rate is going up. We calculated it the other day. It's at 4.8%, heading towards 5. Remember, in 2004, 2005, 2006, really all through the 90s, the cap rate was between 6 and 8. We got down to 4.5 because we were in a zero interest rate world. So if it goes to 5%, can it go to 5? Absolutely, positively it can. And that's at full value. Say we're doing everything right. We're getting our vacancy is down. Listen, we want to rent these properties in a week or two. I just leased one of mine in 5 days. That's just what happens but if you overprice it, it sits on the market. We can't have it sit on the market. So if the cap rate just goes up to 5 and everything else stays the same, that $400,000 goes to $360,000. You lost $40,000. And if you don't manage your vacancy factor, you don't manage your rental income, and it goes to 5%, which it will, and you only get $15,000 at a 5 cap, the price of the house now justifies only $300,000. And what if it goes to 6? Now this is the low end. That's the low end of normalization. The low end of normalization on that. Keep that in mind. That is the low end. Could go to 8. So if it goes to 6%, a 6 cap, that $400,000 is no longer worth anywhere near that. It's only worth $300,000. And God help you if you don't manage your properties well, and rents go down, and you only get $15,000 in return and a 6 cap. That house becomes a $250,000 house, and you've lost $150,000. Can it happen? Yes, absolutely, positively, it certainly can. Let me go to my next slide, and let's talk about that. Now, we talked about this before. People just can't seem to get this. We've been using these simple metrics of rent versus own. From really up until the year 2000, what you paid for your house payment was very similar to what you paid for your rent. The two equaled each other. Now, there's offsets on each one of these, but they were pretty close. So if your rent was $1,900, that's typically what your house payment should be, and that is no longer the case. So the median rent is still between $1,900 and $2,100, but the median mortgage payment is between $3,000 and $3,200 a month. So it's way cheaper to rent than it is to own. And just looking at this, if we just do the math, the rent to own, $2,000, I'm giving it the benefit, the higher end of it. So $2,000 versus $3,100. That means that we're 32% overpriced here in Phoenix, a great marketplace. We just got this median home price here in Phoenix last month was $448. Multiply it by what we're overpriced. It means we're overpriced by over $144,000. So that $448,000 is going to drop to $300,000. Get that? $300,000 just doing a rent to own. Ancient. This is like old school math. And it's telling you that it is overpriced. It is 30% more to own a property here in Phoenix than it is to rent that very same property. Something is really radically wrong. Now, we're telling us, our math is telling us that. Our liquidity models are telling us that. My timing models are telling me that. So what I'm telling you is that if you're buying now, you are buying at the worst time you possibly could, because much better times are coming. Particularly now if you leverage. So let me just go through this a little bit more. Just bear with me. Maybe another 10 minutes, I'll have this done. Just bear with me. If you like my videos, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. I love your comments too. I don't mean to be pedantic or to be overbearing on this. I'm trying to be informational, because if you make a mistake, it's going to take you 10 years to recover. If we do this right, you're going to make a fortune. I've done this. This is my 4th time. I've seen this before. I know exactly what to do. So let's do it. Let me go to my next slide here and let's just talk about this. Now, this is what we're looking at here, is that Canada's already ahead of us. They peaked Q1 of 2022 at, this is an index, by the way. It is not a price. So they peaked at 200 on the index in June. It's the latest that they've had, and it's coming out of Federal Reserve electronic data. So this is pretty good. This is pretty good information. It's down to 153. So they peaked, and they just been dropping like a rock. So they're down 23% in last couple of years. Just what I've been telling you. I've been telling you that we stopped buying in June of 2022 for this very reason. We don't want you to lose this kind of money. This is why we're doing this, is to keep my clients and you from making mistakes. Timing is very, very real. Now, it's 14 years up. In that 14, it's hard for you to make a mistake. But once you recognize that you've peaked, what's the definition of a peak? It means like it's not going any higher. And if it's not going any higher, it's not going to just stay there. What's it going to do? It goes down from there. So that's where we're at. Let me go to my next slide. Let's just talk about that. Now, it also coincided with a bottoming in unemployment. So July of 2022, look at this. So, first quarter 2022, market peaked, another quarter later, and unemployment peaks. And from there, theirs has gone up to 6.9%. That's a pretty healthy rate. This is a national figure. So locally in some of these places, it's even worse than this. Now, let's look at Surprise. This is one of my favorite marketplaces. This is up near the chip manufacturing plant. That's billions. It's like hundreds of billions of dollars. They just got a contract from NVIDIA for $100 billion in AI chips, and we are just flooding the zone with all kinds of high income software engineers and high tech manufacturing. This is going to be really, really good. But look at, even with all that going on here in Surprise, remember, I told you we peaked like in June of 2022. Surprise peaked July of 2022 at 489. And here's the last sale in June. Now, I'm going to be getting July pretty soon. Remember, these are always, they're always in arrears. So we have a hard time with that. But the median sales price in June of this year was 416, down 15%. 15%. Now, what if you put down the average buyer? This is where our building window is at. These are very affordable homes. They start about $350 to $450. Very, very affordable homes. And these are, who do they attract? They attract first-time home buyers, and they're scrimping and saving. Mom and dad are giving them money. Everybody's chipping in. They're putting all their money into the down payment, and they typically buy it at FHA, which is 3.8%, and then they finance back the mortgage insurance premium, so the equity position is less than 2%, or they've done a conventional with 3% or 5% down. Typically not 20 or 25%, and look what's happened. It's gone down 15%. What does that make them? Come on, this is really, really simple. It puts them underwater significantly, a lot. So let me just open this up so you can take a look at it. It's dropped. How much is that? 16 to. It's dropped $70,000. So if you only put down 20 and it loses 70,000, you're upside down by $50,000. What does that tell you? Now, this is what my timing model is saying, that we're going to get at waterfall prices just like we did in 2008. That's what I am expecting. Now, I'm telling you that for 14 years, you can virtually do anything you want. So when you're down here, when it starts, because it comes down, the cycle completes, and then it comes back up on this side. It starts over again. Right here, these 14 years, you can do almost anything that you want. But here is where the danger lies, and we are right here somewhere. So don't be buying. And who's going to be selling? So let's just talk about the fact that my math is wrong. My math is all washed up. I don't know what I'm talking about. I've only been in business for 50 years. I represent millions and millions of dollars with a portfolio money, but I'm an idiot. I don't understand. I'm absolutely, obviously wrong. So who's selling? Let's look at the comps. I've done this before. So only 3 people in your neighborhood are going to change the value of your entire neighborhood. Those are called comps. So when you call your local broker and they come out, well, let's check the comps. Let's see what your neighborhood, just like yours, are selling for. Well, who's selling? Let's take a look at who is selling. This is really telling. Let's take a look. So look, we just got this from Wall Street Journal. It's saying the lowest existing home sales since 1996 was 75 million more residents. So we're hardly selling anything. And we have 500,000 more sellers than buyers. And the buyers, the people who are not selling, they have 3 to 4% mortgages. They're not interested in selling their houses because it would cost them double just to replace their house. They go from owning a house, a mortgage payment of $1,600 to $1,800 to a mortgage payment of $3,200 to $3,400. They're not selling. Only those that are forced to sell are selling. Look at who these people are. We've talked about this before. We talked about the fact that people are tapped out. We've got $1.3 trillion in credit cards at like 25 to 30% in interest. Now we've got this buy now, pay later, which has also got $1 trillion. People that couldn't put any more on their credit cards, so now they're going to buy now, pay later, but they get the product. And we see that the savings and loans, their bank savings accounts, they're tapped, they're depleted, and the only thing that's left is the IRA and the 401ks, and we're seeing withdrawals. So people are tapped. Walmart and Target are coming out saying, and Home Depot, they're saying people are not buying because they don't have any money. So this is who we're looking at. Let me go to my next slide. Let's just talk about this. And the Biden administration was just crowing over this. They thought this was just great. They thought this was wonderful. So they resided over 3.9 million mortgages. But you know what? Only 40% of them went bad. Can you believe that? 40% of the mortgages that these guys worked on, 40% of them went bad. And they're thinking, oh, this is just wonderful because we're not going to let them get foreclosed on. We're going to put them in loss mitigation. And they did that for 3 years. People didn't make house payments for 3 years. And these people were in charge. Can you imagine that? Would you put someone in charge of your savings account, your checking account that loses 40%? What do you suppose is going to happen to these people? Well, the Trump organization came in, and in the very first quarter, they filed over almost 94,000 foreclosures were filed. That's what's going to happen to them. They're going to have 94,000 foreclosures. People are going to have to go find somewhere to live. That's where we get them. We're going to get a lot of people who used to own homes that got foreclosed on. They're going to be renting, and they're not going to be buying anytime soon. It's going to be an absolutely outstanding time for us to be landlords. And we're going to get great prices on these properties. And you get a former homeowner. This is what happened in 2008. My portfolio, we went to 100%. We had virtually no vacancy. No one left. People were losing their jobs, and they knew that if they got evicted out of our places, they couldn't get another rental. So they did everything they possibly could to maintain their status with us as a tenant, and we understood that. So we were very, very comfortable with them, and this is going to happen again, and we're all going to make a fortune. Let me go to my next slide. I'm sorry I don't mean to make this too terribly long, but I got some things to say. So if you need more income to retire, yes, check. How about income to escape your career? We've talked about this before. We have a lot of people who are in high stress jobs. They want to get out. Maybe you just want to go actualize your life and go travel. You can go everywhere, anywhere for as long as you want. Maybe you want money for kids, your grandkids. Maybe you want it for college. You want to do an endowment. Maybe you just want to go have some fun. I'm here in Phoenix, Arizona. If I can help in any way, please let me know. We do private consultations. We're getting ready to make a fortune. If you feel like your retirement hasn't had enough money in it that you can literally uh, retire with, and you're going to need here in Phoenix, you're going to need $100 to $125,000 in passive income coming in each and every month that you can count on before you retire. If you don't have that, don't retire. You're going to live a lot longer. You do not want to be, 90 years old and outlive your nest egg. So let's put a plan together. We do this. We have soup to nuts. You don't ever have to see your tenant. You don't have to ever do anything. You are strictly the investors. This 18,000 that we is our typical return on investment. The typical income our typical investor gets is completely passive. That's with having a management company in there. That's covering vacancy. That's covering repairs. That's covering lease up. That's covering absolutely everything, and you're still getting about $18,000 a building. Now we're going to get some great buys on buildings coming, and we're going to get a really, really nice return. You have to decide if this is something that you want. If this is something that you want, contact us, and we're going to start the ball rolling and start the process, get you ready for finance. So you got to get out of debt. You got to start saving your money. You have to make sure that your credit scores are just great, because we're going to want to leverage on this one. And you want to protect that income stream. Do everything you possibly can to make sure that you've got a good job. And if you don't have enough income, go get another job. Don't be afraid to do something. I lost absolutely everything in the 1980s. I ended up delivering pizzas for Domino's. And 9 years later, I was financially free. So don't be so prideful that you think, oh, I can't do that. You need the money. Let's go do this, and quit buying, quit spending. If I can help in any way, you know where I'm at. My best to you. Bye-bye now.